Bike is now warmed up. 14.4 volts, the best that this bike has ever seen. How's it going, my Buell friends? This is my 2009 Buell 1125R that I recently converted the front end to the CR. So if you're interested in that conversion, it's a pretty detailed how-to. It's not that difficult. Go ahead and click up top here for that playlist. But in today's video, we are going to be trying to bulletproof the charging system on this 1125. It's no secret, if you do any research whatsoever on these bikes, they are notorious for charging system issues, for cooking stators, frying voltage regulators, poor Harley and Buell fixes with this relay harness. I mean, the list goes on and on. You can do a little research and it doesn't take much time at all to figure out. These are extremely problematic bikes when it comes to the charging systems. Now, this specific bike, I did upgrade to the EBR rotor. So it has a small oiling port inside of it, so it hopefully cools down that stator. I did just recently, within the past 200 miles, replace the stator with a Rick stator. And now we're on to the voltage regulator, but I just now removed it. One point of mention is this bike did have what's called the Harley harness fix, and that was this Band-Aid harness. Now, if you happen to see this underneath your seat, in this general area, you see this relay, go ahead, trace the wires, ditch it. It was a Band-Aid system that added more variables in an already problematic system and notorious for cooking the relay or just the wires in general. It was a temporary solution that definitely didn't work. So in sum, if you find this harness underneath your seat, ditch it, and I guarantee you, you'll actually get a little bit of voltage back. Now, because there's so many issues with this, obviously just removing this harness is not going to solve every single problem when it comes to the charging system on these bikes. So that leads me into today's video with the voltage regulator upgrade. And in my opinion, the best option when it comes to upgrading the voltage regulator on your Buell 1125. This voltage regulator was in fact pulled from this bike. I cannot confirm if it's the original or not. I did Google the part number and it literally came up with nothing voltage regulator related. And because I am having problems, I presume this is not the original one. And quite frankly, I honestly don't care, because this original shunt style is going to be replaced with a series style MOSFET. Now, I'm not going to be going into a lot of details as far as the difference between this one versus that one. There's a lot of research out there from a lot of good people that, quite frankly, know a lot more about the topic than I do. This one is now a new model. Previously, if you look up some research done by Gregory Nordstrom, he has a lot of amazing information out online. He's done a lot of tests years ago on the charging systems on these Buells. Originally, there was an upgrade. It was a MOSFET style like this. It was a CE605SB that was extremely popular to put on the 08s. Now, the 08s were the first year for these 1125s, and they actually had a little bit different charging system. The stator was different. The main culprit of the 08s was actually over voltage. The factory voltage regulator would fail, and then it would dump 18 volts to the cluster, and that would wig out, and it would just kind of go crazy, because all of this stuff, electronic wise, is very finicky. So when it gets an extreme jump in voltage, it just goes crazy and shuts down. So a big upgrade on the 08s was to swap out the voltage regulators. In 09 and 10. For whatever reason, they switched a different stator and charging system similar to the 08s, but it is in fact different. And the most problematic part for the 09s and 10s was cooking the stator. But now that the EBR rotor has come out, the upgraded Rick stator, I think the final piece of the puzzle is going to be upgrading to this series style MOSFET voltage regulator. And where I picked this one up at was from roadstercycle.com. Gregory Nordstrom's original research led me to that website because that's where he got his original CE605SB kit. Unfortunately, at this point in time, that kit is no longer available. So whenever I went on that website, I asked the customer service some questions as far as that original kit that Gregory used, and the response I got was from the actual owner, Jack Fleming, that this is now the latest and greatest version, this SH847. Now this is out of a newish Suzuki DL1000, roughly a 2015 year. I don't know the specific as far as model years on those, but it's nice to see that if you were to have issues, you can actually just go to Suzuki and purchase a replacement. Now these regulators are rather pricey, and with that being said, because you can go to Suzuki to purchase this regulator, you can actually cobble up your own kit if you really wanted to. However, I highly suggest going with a kit from Roadster Cycle, because one being that Jack tests every single one of these kits before they go out the door. Now, I worked in the auto part industry for a number of years, 8 or 9 years, and it's not uncommon to have a brand new part that has failed. So knowing that he's tested these before they go out the door, you have that extra peace of mind. You cannot test these with a regular multimeter. Jack has a rather complicated system when it comes to testing this kind of thing. So like I said, extra piece of assurance, going with a kit like this and having it tested before it goes out the door. Also, with this kit, you have the connectors already on here. He pneumatic crimps all this stuff and solders it. You have the PVC sheathing. This kit for the Buells, he recommends 5 foot of battery cable, does come with the circuit breaker, recommends 60 inches of stator wire with 4 foot of PVC sheathing on that. And it comes with the shrink tubing and crimp connectors if you want to lob off your existing stator connector and solder it or crimp it onto here. Now, with that being said, Jack did not sponsor me in any way, shape, or form. I did not mention to him that I would be showcasing this kit in a YouTube video. I just love to spread any good customer service received, and especially I love saving a buck. So once I started pricing this stuff out myself, I realized by the time I cobble all these things together, I would have spent a lot less time, a lot less stress and effort with a kit from, say, Roadster Cycle. The only other addition to this kit would be these Deutsch connector ends. So instead of using these crimp connectors and lobbing off my original stator end to crimp onto here, I'm using these factory Deutsch ends that I'll crimp and solder on. This Harley harness, this Band-Aid harness that I did a test here, I pulled out one of the pins, but what I'll be doing is reusing this receptacle. You can buy these brand new, but since I have this beautiful non-usable harness, might as well reuse this receptacle. So I got new Deutsch ends, crimp and solder those on, reuse that receptacle, and we have this phenomenal kit that is darn near plug and play. So I'll quit rambling here. We'll go ahead and show you the install on this 1125 to hopefully make your charging system now bulletproof. So clearly I did a lot of work off camera before I started shooting. I removed the rear fairing piece here. I removed the fuse box cover. Obviously the battery frees up a lot of space. I even removed a T30 Torx bolt right here that loosens up the starter solenoid and the rear brake master cylinder reservoir up top here. Key points here, I did drill a hole right here, and it's kind of far to the edge. If I had to redo it, I'd probably do it a little more centered, but this will reside underneath the battery. And then I did a second hole right here, and it's probably hard to see, but it is in the plastic. As far as bolts, I wish I had the details, but this is just something that I had laying already in my toolbox. I believe it's 1/4 by 20, but it has this nice flat style head. So that will go in like that. The battery will sit over top of that, and it won't have any interference. Now, more than likely, you'd be fine with just a couple washers in this plastic. It is rather rigid, but I went a step further and I made this aluminum bracket. I'll probably just hit it with a coat of paint to kind of cover up the marks. This is something that I already had in my toolbox. I was pre-painted, but you know, bending it and drilling it and stuff, it got scuffed up a bit. No big deal. Sits like such. I ended up getting a little bit longer of a T30 I had in my toolbox, and that'll screw in like such. Here's the identical bolt to the one on the back side here. A little tricky around this wiring harness. And we'll tighten the T30. Now underside the bike, you can obviously see where these two bolts are going through, and I also clearanced a rather large hole right here that the wires will fish through. Go ahead and stick the power wire as well as the stator wires through this hole. Nice satisfying click. I have a couple washers. I have a small washer and then a lock nut. Here's how I mounted it. You have the connectors on the left side here, and why I oriented it this direction was strategically because these fins are going long ways as you ride. The air will pass through and cool this regulator off. If it's flipped 90 degrees and the fins were going this way, the air could get trapped in here and create hot spots. It's not going to cool as well as it would this direction. Also, I like the connectors being along the side. Originally, I thought if the fins were going 90 degrees, I would have these connectors at the bottom. But if you're running through rain, you stop, the water will travel the path of least resistance. And this being the lowest point, if the connectors are here, that water could eventually seep inside these. Now, these are very well waterproof connectors, but eventually water can make its way in there and corrode out the connection. So I think this is the best course of action. It's very clean looking. I mean, as far as a aftermarket voltage regulator goes, being externally mounted, I think it blends in extremely well. Now, you do have plenty of cable if you really wanted to mount it up front, but because you have the radiators, the pods, everything up here, as well as the oil cooler and the exhaust, there's a lot of radiant heat up in the front here. So I think the best course of action was to mount it underneath this tail section here. So now let's go ahead, route some wires. I have the receptacle I want to reuse from the Harley harness. Take some needle nose pliers, pull out this orange piece. Then that exposes how you remove these pins, and obviously I already removed one of these. And there you have the tabs. Just like that. So you want to line this up. And this one is blank, so we'll match up this blank piece to that. It'll line up like that. And it doesn't matter what three wires go where, as long as the three wires obviously match up with the three wires here. Can't go in the blank spot, so that's why we have that. Test it out. Clips in there real nice and sturdy. Now we'll just twist up the excess. This is honestly the first start since I installed the new voltage regulator, so we shall see what it does. If you remember, the original factory voltage regulator, or the original voltage regulator to this bike, was only putting out around 12.2 volts and dipping down after a short while. Bike is now warmed up. 14.4 volts, the best that this bike has ever seen. Now that I'm confident with the bike putting out 14 volts or higher, I idled the bike for roughly 10 minutes. I didn't rev it too much because it is kind of early in the morning and I don't want to annoy the neighbors yet today. So I will be riding this bike here in a little bit, but for the meantime, let me throw the tail section back together. Here's the finalized product all put back together. I mean, look how incredible that looks. Looks like this could have almost been like that from the factory. So this is by far the best way to go about bulletproofing your charging system on your Buell 1125R or CR. So Jack Fleming calls this the Stator Saver Kit, mainly because this factory voltage regulator, the shunt style, pretty much it just always requires the full-on stator power at all times, and that's why you end up cooking the stator. The Harley fix, it was an idea that it would shut off one of the phases, but unfortunately that created more load, more heat, and it would prematurely cook your stator. Now this series style MOSFET voltage regulator directs a lot of that heat that would be generating in that stator assembly, and it transfers it back towards this voltage regulator, hence why it is so large and why it has these heat sinks. Now time will tell whether it will deform this plastic under tray here. I did space it out a little bit off of that. It is mounted to metal very securely on the inside like you saw at the beginning of the video. If anything happens to where it cooks this undertail, I'll be sure to report back, but quite honestly, I think we'll be perfectly fine. Now, if you are in the market for a charging system upgrade, a voltage regulator upgrade on your Buell 1125R or CR, or heck, any other bike for that matter, these kits are relatively universal. Definitely check out roadstercycle.com. They have amazing parts and components tested by Jack Fleming himself, and he has great customer service if you have any questions or anything along those lines. If you're just downright looking for more information on the charging system on your Buell, go ahead and check out Gregory Nordstrom's article where he did a bunch of stuff, and he even dabbled in rewinding his stators. I mean, there's a lot of great information out there from a lot of great people. So if this video helped you out, be sure to give it a thumbs up. I can't thank Jack Fleming enough for creating such an amazing kit, and hopefully pretty soon here I'll go out, ride the bike, put it through its paces, and prove that this charging system now is bulletproof, being at 14 volts or higher, whereas before it was only 12 or under. So I think we made an excellent upgrade, great combo to the Rick stator, the EBR rotor, and now this Roadster Cycle voltage regulator. So if this video helped you out, be sure to give it a giant thumbs up. Definitely consider subscribing. I have a ton of quirky car stuff, bunch of Buell stuff out there, because this is my 4th Buell and probably not my last. So with that being said, I appreciate you watching, and I'll catch you friends next time.